1460 WVOX.
Now, live from Whitney Media, 1460 WVOX, the Greenburgh Report with Greenburgh Town Supervisor Paul Feiner. You can join in the conversation at 914-636-0110. Now on 1460 WVOX, here's Greenburgh Town Supervisor Paul Feiner.
I'm Paul Feiner, Greenburgh Town Supervisor.
And good morning, I'm Pauline Mosley.
And we have a very interesting program. Pauline told me that she had a really amazing guest, a veteran, somebody who is a PhD in computer science from Pace University, who almost threatened suicide after her deployment as a veteran. So we're going to learn about the Veterans Crisis Hotline, and my guest is Avery Leiter. And Avery, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm glad to be here and be able to talk about the Crisis Hotline for Veterans. My name is Avery Leiter, and I retired from the U.S. Army in 2012 as a lieutenant colonel. After my retirement, I went back to school on the GI Bill, getting first a master's degree and subsequently completing my PhD in computer science from Pace University in this past May 2022.
This is fantastic, Dr. Leiter. We're so happy to have a woman a veteran, and with your background, we can't wait to delve in more. So let's just dive right in. What years did you serve?
From 1987 to 2012. I joined the ROTC program in 1985 in Houston, Texas, as I was a student at the University of Houston, where I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Signal Corps and entered active duty in 1987. So I served about 25 years and change.
And where did you serve, and could you tell us in what capacity?
From 1987 to 1988, I went to Signal Officer Basic Course at Fort Gordon, Georgia, where I learned about telecommunications, networking, switchboards, and radios. Then in early 1988, I went to the Communications Staff Officer course in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where I learned hands-on tactical signal skills to be more helpful than just the management skills I had learned at Fort Gordon. Then I went to the Airborne School in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where I failed the Airborne course because I found out I was scared of heights. Mm-hmm. Fort Bragg is where you learn to parachute. Then I went to Germany and served as a platoon leader for the 17th Signal Battalion in Kaiserslautern, which is near Frankfurt. This was the most fun assignment in my entire career because we were always going camping, which we called going to the field for various military exercises, and my soldiers were the best in the world. In my personal life, I married an armor officer with the 3rd Infantry Division, and we had a baby boy, my son Will, in 1989. Then I was assigned to be a communications staff officer to the 93rd Military Police Battalion as they moved from Frankfurt to Saudi Arabia for Operation Desert Shield in 1990. Operation Desert Shield turned into Operation Desert Storm in 1991, and we moved with the ground forces into Iraq and Kuwait, and then returned after the ceasefire to Saudi Arabia. My job
Did you see any fighting there?
All I did was chase the fighters. The military police collected a lot of prisoners of war, and at that particular conflict, everyone wanted to surrender. The previous campaign of military psychology, they had sent leaflets, masses of leaflets in the areas where the Iraqi troops were that promised if they held up the leaflet that we would give them medical treatment and food and water, and if they wanted to surrender. So that's what they did. They surrendered in masses during Operation Desert Storm. So I got to see a lot of prisoners of war, but they just wanted aspirin, food, and water because they all had a headache.
Oh, wow.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
but I didn't have to shoot anybody, and nobody shot at me. So my job there was to keep the radios and military mobile phones working, and my training turned out to be a big benefit. I really enjoyed the Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm, as we all felt confident in our equipment, our training, and our leadership. And I had a large section of radio and telephone repair soldiers that worked for me that never hesitated to do the right job every time. We had burn pits, and you may have heard about burn pits being toxic, but we didn't know that the smoke was dangerous. The wind didn't blow our way. This year, the VA has the funding to accept claims about the burn pits for veterans that were affected.
Well, this is absolutely fantastic, Dr. Leiter, but we have to get ready to go to a break. And we're with Dr. Leiter, a veteran. Thank you for your service. And all our veterans, we salute you. And we're with our town supervisor, Paul Feiner. So we will be back shortly to learn more about Dr. Leiter and the veterans.
Great. And we'll also learn about the Veterans Crisis Hotline, which impacts a lot of veterans.
1460 WVOX.
Now back to the Greenburgh Report on 1460 WVOX. Once again, here's Greenburgh Town Supervisor Paul Feiner.
Hi, I'm Paul Feiner. I'm the Greenburgh Town Supervisor.
And I'm Pauline Mosley. We're happy that you're joining us today.
And we have a very interesting, program, today. My guest is Avery Leiter, and she's retired from the U.S. Army in 2012 as a lieutenant colonel, and she's completed her Ph.D. in computer science from Pace University. And you were in the military. You served in the Middle East. You didn't see combat, but you were at risk all the time because the people that when you were in the Middle East, you never knew what could happen. And then you had a problem. You thought about suicide.
Yes. When I came up to time to retire, it became a situation of loss because I loved the Army and I loved my service and I was at the top of my game. I felt like I belonged. And I was always getting told what to do. There's always orders to follow in a mission. But when I had to leave, then because of age, because the Army is for young people, then I felt a great sense of loss. Loss is a trigger that could cause ideas of suicide, and that is what happened to me. But thank God for the Department of Veterans Affairs that gave me excellent life-saving treatment. And I'd like everyone in the town of Greenburgh to know, and for you to encourage people to put into their phones the new number to dial. It's not 911 like they would deliver a fire truck to your house. It's 988. If you dial 988, you'll be connected to a suicide crisis hotline. And if it's for a veteran, you dial 1 after the music comes on or after the recording comes on. But if it's for something else, like a non-veteran, you don't have to dial 1. You just dial 988 and you'll be connected. It's very important to get life-saving care for a suicidal situation. Any idea of suicide you want to address right away. It can come from depression. It can come from bipolar mania. It doesn't have to be because you were shot at or because of PTSD. I was a person of high accomplishment, and I never thought this would happen to me. I just never thought that. But my situation was that I tied all my accomplishments to my past. So I got to a point where I couldn't see my future.
We have Hugh McAuley. He's the head of our Veterans Advisory Committee in Greenburgh. And I know you deal with a lot of veterans, and I'm wondering if this is a common problem. Have you seen from your interactions with other veterans that suicide is a problem for people, and it may not be only combat related?
Yeah, Paul, we see that. Good morning, and suicide affects all our veterans, and a lot of times veterans that are not in combat situations, they may feel that they were somewhat less value as compared to other veterans that have been in combat. And it's amplified when veterans lose friends that become deployed, and then they have the feelings of guilt. So, yeah, we see that in non-combat veterans.
Is government doing enough to address this problem? And is the VA hospitals doing enough?
I would like to see that there is never enough. And I think that the key is outreach. And, if we have one veteran suicide that can be prevented, then we should do everything we can to do that. So do I think we can do more? Absolutely. And I think the key is outreach.
Did you feel when you retired, did the military help you with a transition, or they said, thank you, you're discharged? And
I got some transition counseling. That was 3 weeks of transition counseling to help me out, process, and move on with my life. But that didn't stop the trigger of suicidal ideation. That wasn't enough.
And you indicated that you retired possibly because of age. Does the military tell you have to leave?
Yes, after so many years of service, you have to go. And your caller has brought up a very good point. Out of every one soldier in combat, or every military person that's in direct combat, that's in pursuit of the enemy, there's about 10 that support that one. So the 10 supporters have a great interest in the fighter, but they all feel a great sense of guilt that they're not that one.
Those are excellent points that you mentioned, Avery, and even in terms of mental health. Like right now, just transitioning, coming from the pandemic, like you said, thank you for sharing, your personal journey, but it shows the resilience. And when one does avail oneself to the resources, what one can do, because you've really turned your life around in such an incredible way that you're really a testimonial to what help can do. So again, can you just explain again what the 688 is and how that works?
It's
not just
9.
For 9. Yes.
The first number is 9, similar to 911, but it's 988. This is important to remember, 988. If I could ask you, Mr. Paul Feiner, to have everyone in Greenburgh, New York, as well as the rest of the listening audience, to put 988 in their phone, I would be most appreciative.
When you called the suicide, hotline, how did they help you?
Well, the first thing they do is they give you confidentiality and anonymity. They explain that they're not going to that what you give them is voluntary. They're not going to intrude. They give you that sensation that they are taking care of you. The first thing that happens is they're routing your call to that area code to make sure that if at all possible, the crisis hotline is correct for you. If you're a veteran or helping a veteran, you press 1, and then you'll be connected to people who have training in the military culture.
And do they send somebody to your house after, or is it all by phone?
It's by phone, but they are connected to the community resources. They won't come to your house unless it's an emergency. Because if you're calling in, it's likely that you're still wanting to live. One of the things about suicide is that part of it is that you are terrified. You're terrified of something. You're terrified of something. What you're afraid of is death, but even though you're ready to commit it yourself. So if you're calling out for help or someone is calling for you, that means you're in a conversation. Once you're in that dialogue, don't be afraid to say to someone, are you considering suicide? It will not cause them to do it. If they say yes, then say, let's call and get some help. In my case, it was a situation where they did have to put me in an ambulance, strap me down, and take me to care.
We're going to be back, and this is a very interesting program. Could you tell us again the phone number?
It's 988. Then for a veteran, press 1.
I'm Paul Feiner, Greenburgh Town Supervisor. We'll be right back with this really interesting program.
Thank you.
Now, back to the Greenburgh Report on 1460 WVOX. Once again, here's Greenburgh Town Supervisor Paul Feiner.
They think it's... Oh, hi, this is Paul. Hi, I'm Paul Feiner, and we're back with one of the most interesting programs. I had a question for you. Avery Leiter is an accomplished U.S. Army retired lieutenant colonel. Now she has her Ph.D. in computer science, and then was thinking about suicide, not because of her non-combat experience, but because you felt lost when you had to retire from the military. And after you got the help from the suicide hotline, did you ever feel, I want to kill myself again, or is there any follow-up, to make sure that a thought that when somebody survives an attempt that basically it won't happen again?
No, what happened for me was that I needed to be hospitalized. So I, with a little bit of talking to, I consented to being hospitalized. I was hospitalized in the Veterans Administration Hospital, and I got life-saving care there. I was put on medication that banished all thoughts of suicide from my mind. Those troubling thoughts, those ideas that I just thought I couldn't get rid of were gone. Then they kept me there until I was stable on those medications and then discharged me. But under continuous care, I see a psychiatrist every month. I see a psychotherapist every week. And so and from what I understand, this will be my situation for the rest of my life. The VA will care for me and make sure that I do not ever have another idea of suicide in my mind.
And you're still getting medication?
Yes, I'm on medication and I'm on therapy.
The other question that I have is, when Pauline, when you suggested the program,
yes,
and you mentioned, we're going to put somebody on the program who had threatened suicide or thought of suicide, I immediately thought, this is possibly a little awkward. Do you find that it's awkward to talk about suicide, or are you embarrassed to tell your story?
Yes.
And you have so many accomplishments.
That's part of it. I am embarrassed because part of being an accomplished person is that you're really proud of yourself. You have high confidence. Mm-hmm. You're sure that you can do things. You want to show off. You want to be a perfectionist. And then to admit a flaw is kind of hard. But the thing is that otherwise I can't save other lives. I have to let people know that they can save lives. They can save another person's life by asking them if they think that they're depressed. Mm-hmm. Are you considering suicide? And then putting them in touch with help.
And, I'm also thinking, you're accomplished, how many people get PhDs? Not that many. So, the fact that you got a PhD in computer science, now you're accomplished again. So is that something that, from a mental health standpoint, enabled you to overcome the challenges of, you now transitioned from a high-ranking position in the military to a very accomplished PhD?
Well, that was partly because the GI Bill was available to me as part of my military service when I got out, and that would pay for my tuition, books, and living stipend to go to Pace University. But continuing on the PhD plan was part of my mental rehab. I wanted to prove to myself that I could get all my cognitive function back, because when you try to commit suicide, you're in a low functioning position in your brain.
Pauline, how did you meet our PhD?
Well, I'm so honored and really humbled to have the show with you, Dr. Leiter. I met Dr. Leiter as a doctoral student. I was her advisor for her dissertation in quantum computing, and at the time, I didn't know any about this. I mean, her medication, therapy, and what she was doing was fantastic because I knew nothing. I'm learning about this right today on the show, and I'm just absolutely flabbergasted because when I first met Avery before becoming Dr. Leiter, she was brilliant, a brilliant woman. And as you know, my passion is always trying to cultivate and motivate, inspire more women to go into the fields of computing. Dr. Leiter worked with me. I had the privilege of working with her in 3 semesters, and she did a phenomenal job in her defense. Wrote a paper, a research paper, which won Best Paper Award on an international and a top-tier journal. So her cognitive skills and her programming skills are just far more than what I've seen, and I've been teaching for over 40 years. So I'm very, very happy to have had the privilege to be your advisor and bring you to this other level of success. And I'm very thankful that you're so transparent in sharing your journey with mental health and your challenges, because we want everyone to know that there is no stigma. And just as we are passionate about bringing more women into STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, I can see that Dr. Leiter is also a nurturer because she wants to save lives from her experience and her background, which is so broad, of the military as well as computer science. She is a phenomenal force to be reckoned with in helping women and all others that have mental health issues. So thank you so much, Dr. Leiter, for the work that you have done and are continuing to do, and your future is absolutely incredible.
Does the military, when you said that after a certain number of years you have to retire, they don't give you a choice, right?
Right.
And is that a mistake from the military? I mean, if you were like Secretary of Defense or, would you think that the military should have a different policy for?
Well, soldiers can't be old people. They really need to be young because it's a high energy profession.
Mm-hmm.
And you, what do you think about the forced retirements?
I think that they have to happen.
Yeah, I'm just asking Hugh McAuley if he's still on the line.
Oh, is Yuma still there?
Yeah, that's absolutely, Avery just said it right. I mean, there are retirement ages for safety issues and ability issues. But, I think that Avery said something really important, and that these programs, including the VA program, saved her life. And that is so critical. And, Paul, as you know, the key thing is our outreach. We need, just like Avery was able to step forward, we need to identify our veterans sitting at home and out in the community that have not reached out for help. Those are the individuals we're looking for, that we want to get those individuals pulled out of their homes. And the things our committee talks about at every function, that family members should look for, that isolation, the mood swings, diet, and, people change the way they eat. If they start to see drug and alcohol use, I would strongly encourage anyone listening to your program, please, if you have a family member that is a veteran, regardless of their age, if they're, anything at all, if they're not involved with veterans programs and you see these mood swings, please don't hesitate to pick up a phone and call Finer's office. Please reach out. Everything is confidential, but, the success rate of these suicide programs is terrific. But what we find with suicides, they are committed by people that have not reached out most of the time. And those are the people we want to get. We want to reach out and, it's like the veteran treatment courts that have been established, when homeless veterans are found on the street, they're not locked up with the general population, the police support, and it's all identifying veterans in crisis that have not participated in these programs yet. And in the suicides we've seen in the county in the last couple of years, they've been because of isolation and no one took action. So family members listening, if you have a veteran in crisis, I strongly encourage you to dial the phone, dial the number on their behalf. But Avery, terrific job, terrific.
I'd like to add to that part of my wanting to commit suicide was I wanted to stop those bonds of love, of friends and family. So I got very irritated with my loved ones. So that's part of pushing them away and isolating yourself.
And we'll be right back. Again, could you give us the phone number?
It's 988, and for a veteran, you dial 1.
And we could save a life.
Yes.
This program saves one life. It's worth it.
It's worth it. Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be right back in a couple minutes.
1460 WVOX.
Now back to the Greenburgh Report on 1460 WVOX. Once again, here's Greenburgh Town Supervisor Paul Feiner.
Hi, I'm Paul Feiner. I'm Greenburgh Town Supervisor with Pauline Mosley. And we have a really interesting guest, Avery Leiter, and she is a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army. And she talks about her suicide attempts, not because of her actually military service, but because she was at some point forced to retire because of age and felt a loss. How did you decide to go back to school? That seems to be a significant reason why you're doing so well.
Well, that was part of the counseling that I received, was to remind me of opportunities that I couldn't see in my depression that, has caused the suicide. I couldn't see that I had opportunities available to me, such as the GI Bill, and that the transition counselors had tried to tell me, but I wasn't hearing. Once you've kind of got the idea in your mind that you don't want to live, you stop thinking about your future. But the GI Bill would pay for me to go to school, and as a part of my service, that was a benefit available to me. It's important to know that today, over 22 veterans are committing suicide each day. That's a higher percentage than the regular population. The next highest group is men with AIDS. That they are 11 per day. And then the other rates are about 6 or 7, the other groups 6 or 7 per day of the other groups of people that are committing suicide. That's why the Veterans Crisis Hotline was first formed, was to try to address veteran suicide, but then it became a total national suicide hotline that they wanted to make. They made it into law. They created the law in 2020, but they only made it available, a demand that every telephone service operator have it working as of July 16th, this past summer. The number is just 3 digits, 988, and it's the law.
I wanted to ask Hugh McAuley if this is a problem in Greenburgh and in Westchester. Do you know veterans who have threatened to take their lives or sadly took their lives?
Yeah, we've had in the last 5 years, we had 2 suicides in Westchester County, and unfortunately, those 2 veterans did not reach out for help. And we had a 3rd veteran that moved from Westchester to Pennsylvania and took his life. Again, the young man did not reach out for help. And that's why it's so important for family members to step in. And we're not talking specifically at any age group, because our Vietnam veterans are higher at risk than believe it or not, people in their late 60s and 70s have for years suffered, and they can't suffer anymore. So, the suicides we have seen have been because they have not reached out for services. And that's the target group that we focus on with every event we do, Paul, as you know. But it's so critical. It really is. But unfortunately, they have happened, and it's the saddest thing to watch.
And sometimes you may be surprised at the type of person who would commit suicide, like somebody like you wouldn't fit the profile of somebody who you would think would have considered suicide.
Well, the outward appearance of suicide, sometimes it's easy to see people are stressed and people have outward signs. But yes, you're right. We have people that are suffering from extreme PTSD that can hide behind the facade, and, inside they're falling apart. And, we just want to remind all of our veterans that whether they suffer outwardly or inwardly, they're never alone. Our veterans are not alone. And the family members, please remember that, and that our veterans are not alone. All we have to do is find out. There was an opportunity going back before Vietnam when service personnel were discharged. There was a local member of the community that was advised that veterans were coming home, that a veteran was coming back to the town of Hartsdale, and a agent for the town of Greenburgh, or a member of the American Legion or the Disabled American Veterans, a veterans organization would reach out and just say, hi, come to our meetings, be part of. We want you to come out and be with us, to develop that relationship. That connection was severed during Vietnam by the administration, and so now our veterans come back into our communities. They're anonymous. No one knows they're returning except the immediate family, and sometimes the veterans will return without the immediate family knowing it. And those are the high-risk suicide candidates that we've seen, and those are some of the causes. So, again, the reaching out is so critical because they are not alone. There's so many services, as Avery said, and the success rate once people are in treatment is really, really high. But it's getting them in, and that's our major issue.
And Avery, you've had challenges as a woman. You were divorced. You had then remarried. Could you tell us a little bit about your personal experiences?
Yes. Well, the women are about 9% of the Army. So I was always in the minority in the Army. And on one hand, it was a lot of fun because that meant that I could pick and choose a life partner because I had a great ratio of men to women to select from. And all of those men were in very good physical condition and drug-free and of high character. So I had both of my life partners. My first husband and my second husband came from my military service. They were also in the service. That was a good thing, but it was a little stressful because when you're in the minority, then you have to prove yourself all the time. And that meant a little bit of stoic behavior was considered of high value, that kind of behavior where you don't admit a flaw, you don't admit that you did something wrong, you don't apologize, you're always trying to be brave, even if you're scared. That was constantly going on in my mind, so that became part of my persona.
So it's tough to be a female career military officer.
Yes, you have to be tough. You have to be tough.
And when you're smiling, you seem like you're not tough.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, but would you have any advice for somebody considering a career in the military? What could they do? How could they prepare better for military service and post-military service?
Well, if you're considering the military, you have to really enjoy adventure because it is a constant adventure, one adventure after the other, and it is. It's from the very first time that they start military training, you have a lot of physical activity. So it's a lot of physical activity in the military, and for success to be physically fit gives you a big advantage. If you are physically fit when you enter, then you're at a big advantage. That's very, very, very helpful because they will get you in shape. But it will be painful if you're not in shape before you start.
I want wanted to thank you, Avery, for today for really removing the stigma behind suicide and for opening the doors for conversation, and also Paul Feiner for having this program where we can really address the elephant in the room and help so many individuals, veterans, as we move into the holidays. As Hugh said, loneliness and depression around the holidays, and you see all these displays of love and happiness. There are those in our society and in our communities and in our residential areas that are alone. And as Hugh said, if we just reach out to veterans, reach out to different ones in the community and make sure that everyone is okay, we can collectively begin to combat this mental health issue. It's an issue just like drugs, overeating, drinking. So, this really, just want to say, you said earlier in our show that you were embarrassed, and I just want to say there really is no embarrassment about asking for help. As you know, as educators, it's like a student in the room who's embarrassed to ask for help and doesn't understand. There's never any embarrassment when you say you need help, because help and resources are there to help us grow and move into a more positive direction. So I really want to thank you, Dr. Leiter, for really removing the stigma and being so open and sharing your journey. And I'm sure that this is going to help and impact all of our listeners, those that are veterans or serving, or those that are non-veterans that may be thinking or having a thought of depression. And so and thank you, Paul Feiner, for allowing this dialogue to be had, because I'm sure this is going to help a lot of people to be, and just make our public more aware of these signs, that we can simply reaching out and just having a conversation or recognizing something intervention is the best prevention. And like you said, Paul, earlier, if we can just save one life or deter one person from going down this path, then this show has been so successful.
Good, and thank you very much, and good luck. And I hope you have only happiness and success in your life.
Thank you.
Terrific. I'm Paul Feiner, Greenburgh Town Supervisor, and thank you, Pauline, for suggesting this.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Paul. Thank you, Avery, and you for joining us today.
Great. I'll see everybody next week.